He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Rocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Storypower TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Lauren Norris.
As I held the steel sheet in place, she looked at me with the angle grinder in her hand and she just kind of sheepishly grinned and she said, you know the history of me in like straight lines, right? And I leaned in a little closer and I said, but you got this. It's going to be fine. As a leader, if you don't recognize the power of self-talk, the ability to use it as a leader, you could find yourself in trouble with the people on your team. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Lauren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you the number of times that I've been depressed, anxious, concerned about my job, about keeping my job, about doing a good job, about being competent. I mean, maybe you've heard the phrase imposter syndrome. You know what the imposter syndrome really is? I mean, when you boil it right down to the nuts and bolts of the psychology of it. I'm not going to get into the real psychology of it because I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to tell you from an experiential thing on my part, as well as a lot of people that I've witnessed. The imposter syndrome usually looks like internal comparison that says, I'm not as good at this as you think I am. I can't really do it. I mean, I know how many times I've failed in the past, and I could give you a whole list. I mean, I can tell you how many times I tried this and failed, and tried that and failed, and I tried this and failed. And you really shouldn't trust me to do this job, because trust me, I can screw it up. Then that imposter syndrome that prevents us from excelling, from achieving greatness, from pursuing our potential. You'll notice that is not the nature of people who have actually achieved greatness. No, they have this uncanny confidence. Now, it doesn't mean that they always have. I love listening to some of John Maxwell's way back when days. John talks about how if you find a copy of his first book, he'll give you more money than you paid for it. He doesn't care what you paid for it. He'll buy it back from you just to make sure it goes in the garbage. Because in his opinion, his early books weren't worth reading. I have some of his early books. Some of the books he wrote when he was working on his doctorate's degree. Some of the books that he wrote when he was early in counseling as a pastor. Like, I think I still have it. In fact, it's called Children Are Wet Cement. I'm not saying it's untrue, that the statement is untrue, but some really interesting ways of looking at life when you're in your 20s and you have no kids, to be telling people about their kids. However, I met his father as well. And Mr. Maxwell, Dr. John Maxwell's father, was quite an interesting character. Everybody, made way for him as the old man made his way to the stage. I believe he was 88 or 90 when I first met him. And as he made his way to the stage, everybody was like, is he going to be okay? Is he going to be? And then he got up there and ran back and forth from one side to the other. There wasn't a shy bone in his body. There was nothing frail or feeble about him. He was intellectually sharp. He was physically capable. He was courageous and bold in the latest years of his life. Amazing. How did that happen? Well, if you listen to John Maxwell talk about his upbringing, he'll tell you, Dad was tough on us. He had some really hard sayings like, you can work now and play later, or you can play now and work later, but either way, you're going to work. You can pay now and play later, or you can play now, or you can pay now and play later. Play, yeah. But either way, you're going to pay. Let that concept sink in for a moment and think how many people want that immediate gratification. They have no concept of delayed gratification. And yet at the same time, there was an encouragement that said, anything you set your mind to, you can accomplish it. You can achieve it. And John Maxwell will tell you that his positive mental attitude about his ability to succeed is the driving force in his life, and it always has been. In the very brief season of his life, when he decided to go into being a pastor, in his own words, he said to his dad, don't give me the inheritance of wealth because I'm going to be broke most of my life. I don't think managing money is going to be in my future. So give it to my brother. And his brother is a very wealthy man as a result of that seed investment early on in his college days. And because he has a knack for money, and because he got specifically trained in that, and because a lot of people around him believed he would be the money man. He made a lot of money. John went into the ministry. A couple of $1,000s a year was all he was making early on. He'll tell you that. It's in his books, and you can find it in his videos. I'm not making things up. But he'll also tell you that over the course of his life, he realized that money is not a bad thing, and money and ministry are not necessarily evil opponents. What he realized is that money gives you options. And he said, given the option, I've had a lot of money and I've had no money at all, and I prefer to have a lot of money. And he's found ways to earn that. But see, all of that positive mental attitude, you'll pay now and play later, or play now and pay later, but either way you're going to pay. You can work now and play later, or play now and work later, but either way you're going to work. All of those philosophies, all of those driving axioms, they're really simple when you get down to it. It's the story you're telling in your head. But so is the story of the imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I don't even know how I got this job. I can't even cut a straight line. I mean, literally, I'm holding this sheet of steel. This young woman in her early 20s, she's probably 85 pounds dripping wet. She's got an angle grinder between the two of us, pointing it right at my chest as I'm holding this steel. She's got both of her hands on it, and she's saying to me and to herself, I can't cut a straight line. You saw the results last time. Now, I could have just said, you know what? Why don't you hold the steel and I'll do the cutting then? But she needs to know that I believe in her, and she needs to learn to believe in herself. And by the time she was done with 4 long cuts, almost 3 feet long, each of the 4 cuts, they were pretty straight. I'd say like in the 95% range. And I've seen her welding work. She's pretty good with a welder as well. Pretty impressive, making $30 an hour at 25 years old without a college degree. But in her own mind, I don't like drills. I don't like power screwdrivers. I don't like angle grinders. It's my least favorite work in the world. But she's good at it. Why? Because she realizes it's a challenge, and she's very meticulous at it. She works a little harder to get it right because she knows she's not naturally gifted at it. And so she puts a little effort in it. But the juxtaposition of her willingness to work harder and her willingness to also internally say, I'm no good at this, that can lead to disaster. How many times have you walked away from a project, a job, an assignment, an opportunity, and said, I'm honestly not ready yet? I've told this story before, but it's been probably 10 or 12 years since the event happened. I went to a meeting before I joined the John Maxwell team. I'd been coaching the Dale Carnegie team. I was already a part of Toastmasters. I was competing in Toastmasters, and I really wanted to break into the public speaking arena. And so I went to this meeting, and this was even before I started the podcast. Wow, that was a long time ago. I went to this meeting, and I heard a guy by the name of Steve Siebold, who had been top of the National Speakers Association. He has been $1 million earner many years in a row. He has apprenticed and trained hundreds of motivational speakers and public speakers all over the world. And I went to this meeting where he was talking about the value of apprenticeship and how you should come up under him. And he brought this lady up who said, you know, I've actually, I only hired Steve because the guy that introduced us passed away unexpectedly and left me with a contract that I had to fill. And I knew if he recommended Steve that I should be able to trust him. But it wasn't his one sheet. It wasn't his resume. It wasn't a sizzle reel. It wasn't any of that. It was the fact that someone that I knew and respected vouched for him. That's what gave him the opportunity. And then he came and he spoke and he did a great job and the audiences loved him and there were great results from the training that he did. And so he's the #1 guy on our docket right now. Every year we come back, he comes back with a new title, he works up a new program for us, and what he delivers is always top shelf. And so I just want you to know, it doesn't matter how much marketing you do to get your one sheet out there, etc. It's going to be complicated to get your foot in the door if you think you're going to make $25,000 to $50,000 a speech. And then Steve came by, and Steve said, you know, every year 50,000 people go, I want to be a speaker. And of those 50,000, about 25,000 joined Toastmasters. And I was like, well, that's me. So I'm half the crowd at this point. He said, and of those, about 5,000 joined the National Speakers Association. I said, well, I haven't done that yet, but I could. And he said, and of those, the average income is $27,000 a year. And I went, I was making 3 times that on my regular job. Why would I give up my regular job to do that, to be average? Now, nobody looks at themselves and says, ooh, I want to jump in and just be average. Or I want to jump in and be below average. Everybody wants to jump in and be the exception to the rule. Everybody says, you know, 25,000 for a year. I can make that in one speech. And then they try it and they realize it's not as easy a game to break into as one might think. However, at the end of the event, the lady that answered that question in front of the crowd and said he only got the opportunity because he had been apprenticed by someone that I respected. I had a chance to chat with her. Of course, everybody in the room is walking up, handing her a business card and, you know, how do I get on your list and who has to apprentice me? And if I join his apprenticeship, will you give me a chance? And everybody in the room was doing that. And I just stood there and watched a lot of them chat with her. And when I walked up and had a couple of seconds, I said, I just want to say thanks for coming because what you said really changed the way I look at the industry. And then she looked at me and she asked a very poignant question. She said, well, what is it you talk about? And I said, I'm working on a speech right now called The Power of PDA. She's like, no. I'm in HR. We don't talk about PDA. That's a problem that gets people fired. And I said, well, if you're thinking of the public display of affection, then yeah, that's called sexual harassment. But I'm talking about the public displays of appreciation because we both know that 6 in 10 people who leave a job don't leave because of the pay or because the job is too hard. They leave because they feel like they're underappreciated, like their boss doesn't recognize them, doesn't acknowledge their contribution. And if we could just change that in the workplace, we could change everything. She goes, I'm interested, I'm in. How much do you charge and when's your next availability? And I was like, wow, what an opportunity. I didn't have a business card. I didn't have a website at the time. I had nothing. And I said, well, the program's not quite ready yet. And I didn't even have the courage in that moment. Imposter syndrome, self-talk set in. Because I didn't have a website, because the program had only been delivered twice at that point. This is 12 years ago. I wasn't ready, and I knew it. But instead of taking the opportunity, as Laurel Langmeyer has since taught me, say yes and figure it all out in the background. Get the business, get the contract, set a date to talk about it again. And between now and the time that you talk about it again, get yourself ready. No, I didn't have any of that. Because that's not the way I grew up, because my self-talk wasn't there yet, because I didn't realize that the story inside my own head that said, you're not ready for this, this is too big a deal. I mean, he just told you, only half the people who decide to be a motivational speaker, only half of them actually make it to Toastmasters. And only 10% of those actually make it to the National Speakers Association. And only 2% of those actually make a viable living. Who do you think you are? All this is playing in the back of my head. This story that I'm not quite good enough, that I'm not quite ready, that my presentation isn't ready, that I'm not ready, that I haven't been apprenticed yet. And I walked away from a golden opportunity because the story in my head told me I wasn't ready yet. And I know some of you are struggling with the same thing right now. The opportunity is knocking and you're looking out the curtains going, yeah, but I'll catch the next one. And just like the young lady who said, you know what happens with me in straight lines? And just like me, standing there knowing that the opportunity was there and it could have been a lucrative beginning to a career that has yet to make millions of dollars. Oh, I've learned a lot. I've impacted a lot of people. I've had great opportunities. I've had great opportunities that I was ready to capitalize on, and some that have come by that I went, I'm chasing that one down. I will do everything I can to be ready for that one when it gets here. But there have also been those that because of my own self-talk, my own self-hatred, my own self-loathing from most of my life, I still have to deal with, and I still hear those stories, the grumblings under my breath. I'd be willing to bet as a leader, you have people on your team struggling with imposter syndrome, asking themselves, am I really good enough? How did I even get this job in the first place? I don't know why they hired me. I'm not that smart. I don't have the degrees they were looking for. But the language inside their head usually is only heard under their breath. It's a mumble. It's the same story repeated over and over again, regurgitated, manipulated. They hear it inside their head. They tell themselves the same thing again and again. They repeat it. Sometimes it comes out in a little mumble under the breath, but usually it's just a murmur that stays inside their head. And every time they repeat the story, the problem is there's nobody there to argue the point. There's nobody there inside their head with them to say, but that's not true. Let's look at the facts. In fact, I think one of the wisest counsels I've ever heard was from Brendan Burchard. He had a client who was really struggling with this imposter syndrome. I mean, she was borderline giving it all up. She was ready to check out, be done with the business, be done with herself. She was done. And he said, I want you to do a favor. I want you to go home. And as soon as you get home, I want you to dig through all the boxes on your bookshelf, in the closet, in the attic. Call your mom if you have to. Get every trophy, every ribbon, every award you've ever received, every medal. I don't care if it comes from pre-K. Get everything you've ever won and lay them out on the bed next to each other. And then ask yourself, have I really had a lifetime of failure? Because the chances are you have some successes along the way, successes that you didn't count. Successes that when you mumble that story over and over in your head, you leave them out. I remember working in corporate America, and one of the guys that I had an office with had what he called his I love me wall. And it was every award, every achievement award, every accomplishment, every thank you, every big commission check that he had ever received in this company was in a frame on the wall behind his desk, so that when he walked in every day, he could look at that wall and go, those are my accomplishments. The idea of being able to look at yourself and say, I have accomplished, I have succeeded, even if it's small, it's a win, it's moving in the right direction. Ask yourself, if you're not keeping track of those wins, those successes, those small blips on the forward moving radar, who is? And if you're not keeping track of them, what about the story inside your head? Is the story inside your head betraying you? Is the story inside your head telling you you'll never win? You're not enough? You're not good enough? You're not smart enough? Everybody's already figured you out? Oh, I have a couple of haters in my life that they love to come along and go, you're not all that. You think you're blah, 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 and you're not. And some of those haters are in my head, and some of them are real people. And when they're real people in my life, I'm done with them. I don't have time for that. And not that I want to live in a fairy tale land or a fantasy land that everything in my life is wonderful and it's always looking up and I'm the most wonderful. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I saw a great meme yesterday. In fact, I saved the picture. I haven't shared it yet, but I will. It said, Don't let just anyone on your ship, because some of them will sink the ship just because they can't be captain. Don't let just anyone on your ship. Some of them will sink the ship just because they can't be captain. I'm going to tell you, there's a whole lot of truth in that statement. A whole lot of truth. There are people who will look at you, even when you're looking at yourself in the mirror with that imposter syndrome going, I have not succeeded. I cannot succeed. I'm ready to give up. And they look at you still with jealousy and they're like, well, hey, you should give up because, you think you're all that and you're really not all that. Trust me, I've stared these people in the face across the table. I've listened to them wail and whine and bemoan everyone else's success in their life and call them every name under the book. It's every name under the book. Yeah, every name in the book. What's under it? It's a whole different thing. But when you have someone with that much negativity, that much hatred, that much jealousy and envy, there's something wrong in their soul. And it's probably the stories they're telling inside their head. They're repeating them themselves. They're regurgitating negative, hate-filled thoughts. Don't do it to yourself. And don't let those people on your boat, because they will put a hole in it just because you won't let them be in charge. They will try to take charge of your life by the negative comments they make, by the hateful things that they say, by the things that they say to others about you. Don't let them on your ship. And if that negative nanny, if that person who's yelling the negative things about your life is the one inside your head, get a hold of those thoughts. Beat them into submission. Make them obey the truth. And if you have to dig out every trophy and every ribbon and every medal that you've ever won and put them on the wall behind your desk so every time you're on a Zoom call you see them all, then do that. If you have to get a book of applause and put it on your desk in front of you, then do that. If you have to applaud every employee in your office, in your team, and say, I'm proud of you today, you've done a great job, even while you're encouraging them to do better at the things that are not quite up to par, do that. The mindset of your employees, the mental health of your employees, the productivity of your team, they all rest in the stories that we're telling inside our heads. And until you get a hold of that story, confidence isn't coming. Courage isn't coming. Hope will be delayed or deferred or destroyed. If the story that you're telling in your head is off, all your relationships will be off. It's just the way it works. Positive mental attitude should not be some fantasy land, fiction-based dream of the future that has no tangent to reality. It should, on the other hand, be your way of looking at yourself saying, okay, so I failed that time, but I'll give it another try. How many times? You will try at least one more time than you fail. You got to make that commitment. My story is I will try at least one more time than I fail. I will not quit on a failure. I will quit trying to succeed. Nobody has ever looked at their toddler and went, oh my gosh, you fell down again. They all look at their toddler and go, wow, 3 steps this time. That's incredible. And when they make it all the way across the room, the entire room bursts in cheerful applause. We should do the same thing as leaders for those on our team, for those that we influence, for the people around you, sometimes for an absolute stranger. I walked out of a meeting I was in this last week and offered scholarships to 2 young people to be a part of the Storypower Academy. I saw them leaving and I realized they're taking all their luggage with them. They're probably leaving the conference. And so I followed them all the way to the hotel parking lot. And as I got to the parking lot, I saw these 2 boys, probably 14 and 16 years old, walking to the car, their mother about 3 steps ahead of them. Mom's got her hands full. One of them has something in his hand, but it's nothing significant. The other one has nothing in his hands. And Mom's got her keys and her hands full, and she's trying to open the door to the car. And I said, gentlemen, are you really going to let her open the door? My boys would never let my wife open the door. In fact, they race me to open the door when that's my job. But they want to open that door for Mom before she gets to the car. We had our little conversation and I started to walk away and Mom had not yet unlocked the car. She was still holding her stuff while we were chatting. As I turned to walk away, I look through the window and I see the younger boy with his hand on the door, blocking Mom from opening it until he gets a chance to open it. And in that moment, he caught the lesson. He caught the encouragement. Be the first one to do the right thing. Lead by example, by doing what you know is right. And I gave him a thumbs up and a high five as I walked away. Why? Because I want to encourage him to continue to be the first one to do the right thing. Chivalry is not dead, but it is a story you tell inside your head. So is your success, and so is your failure. Stop repeating and regurgitating the stories of failure. Start repeating successfully the stories of success. Repeat them again and again. Remind yourself, I have accomplished something. It may have been small, but I can stack them all together until they look big. I can stack them all together until my confidence says, you got this. I believe in you. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.